With us now, the Republican governor of Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker, around. And, you know, Sam Stein, I said, you can't let Sam borrow the money because he'll just go out and buy pot with it, and then suddenly you're in charge. Wow. You're in the middle of this conspiracy.
Nothing wrong with that, right?
So, you said it, not me.
So you're talking about borrowing money. I'm glad you didn't even go to baseball because the Brewers are. I want to talk Packers football, if anything. But that's
I know, but we were just talking beforehand about, you know, you're up here for the
bond rating
agencies. Of course, your neighbor to the south, Illinois, is just an absolute economic basket case. You guys in Wisconsin are doing so well. Sam was asking if you borrow some money.
Yeah.
But talk about it. I mean, it's crazy. You guys are going to get a huge up on your bond rating because I guess you're just
it's good stuff. Well, 4 years ago, we had just over $25 million cash balance at the end of the year, fiscal year 09.
Right.
Now we come in with about just over $1.8 billion, so a pretty sharp contrast. And it's the same thing. A couple years ago when I came in, $3.6 billion overall budget deficit. We now have about a $500 million surplus.
That is great news. So let's talk about then Ryan Braun. What happened? By the way, you see that red A-Rod.
Oh.
Threw him under the bus.
That's right.
You think A-Rod will get booed if he ever plays in Milwaukee?
Well, I think there were a lot of fans last night who watched that pitch being thrown, and that was symbolic of how America felt about all those guys, not just A-Rod. But, I was defending Ryan Braun. And literally, the Sunday night before the story broke,
and I don't believe
I feel a little bit like some of Lance Armstrong's supporters because I was saying it could be, makes sense, and then it was just like a shot to the gut. For me, my sons are 18 and 19. They were both big Brewer fans, and I think a lot of fans across America. These guys let us down.
Yeah, they really did.
And with Ryan Braun, it's bad for the Jews, and that's what matters to me.
That's what matters for you.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is there's so many great Jewish baseball players.
Yeah,
you got your lot to pick from.
Yeah.
You got Hank Greenberg.
Yeah, they're all
Ryan Braun.
Well, the sad part,
of course we got Sandy, but
the sad part about it, though, we were just talking, Tina, before about heroes, is you look, I mean, a guy like Ryan Braun was a quiet, soft-spoken guy, the kind of guy you thought, okay, as a sports figure, the hot shots you really don't want your kids gravitating towards, but this was a nice, quiet, decent guy, and then this happens.
It's really
really makes you
amazing the way
wonder.
every single person, every iconic figure just seems to bite the dust. I mean,
so here,
who do kids admire?
But so there are different ways to handle it. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes terrible mistakes. But I'm up, taking my boys up to see the Red Sox and the Yankees play. And, of course, everybody's booing A-Rod. But there's Andy Pettitte on the mound. Andy Pettitte, who testified and said he used performance-enhancing drugs, but admitted it up front. He said, hey, listen, I had a shoulder injury. I took some stuff that I probably shouldn't have taken. It healed me up faster, and I'm really sorry. That was the end of it. And every time I see Andy Pettitte on the mound, I hate the Yankees, but I go, you know what? That guy was decent.
He took responsibility. That's the problem for a lot of us with Ryan Braun that got upset, a lot of at least Brewer fans, was here it was all this stretch when he was in the news. He kept telling us it didn't happen. He kept putting out a plausible defense. And so for a lot of us said, this is a decent guy. He seems like a quiet guy. He's not over the top. And we were defending him up until the very end. Very frustrating. I'd rather have him just come out and say it's...
He just became the sort of a John Edwards of bicycling.
Ouch.
Well, it does go to the point of, our heroes shouldn't be people in the media or in sports. They should ultimately be, our parents, our kids, our neighbors. We were talking before about not only military personnel, but the families that support them. People we actually know. Don't look somewhere else for a hero. Look in your own backyard. Look at your own neighbors. Find your heroes nearby.
Exactly. Hey, let's talk about the Republican Party. They had their summer conference. How are we doing?
There's a big
Democrats. We're talking Democrats ain't doing great. We're not.
I would say it's the tale of two parties, though, Jay.
It is.
I mean, you look nationally, obviously, the last two presidential elections, some real issues at the federal level.
Right.
Look at the difference, though. 30 states have Republican governors. I mean, nearly as many states have Republican legislative majorities. Most of those states that Obama won the last time around, the battleground states, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, Florida, what do they all have in common? Nevada and New Mexico all have Republican governors.
So let me ask you this, and that's a great question. What's happening in the states that we're getting right? Because 60% of the governors in America, Republican. We've got the majority of state senators in America, Republican. A huge landslides in 2010. What are Republicans not doing in Washington, D.C. that Republicans at the state and local level are doing?
Three big things. as governors, as state leaders, we're more optimistic than our friends in Washington. We're not just against something. We're laying out a plan. We're laying out a vision. People gravitate.
You've got to, right?
Yeah.
You've got to.
That's how you lead. You don't just sit back and nick the other side. You got to lay out a plan. We talk in terms that are more relevant. And give you a good example. Sequesters, most people just goes right over their head. Debt ceilings, fiscal cliffs. We talk about making our kids' schools better. We talk about balancing our budget so we can live within our means. We talk about helping our neighbor get a job again. And then finally, the third thing, in addition to optimism and relevance, is courage. Having the courage to act. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of American voters just look at Washington and don't think anybody's had the courage to do anything they need to do.
Because they don't have to do what you guys have to do, and Republican and Democratic governors alike. You've got to balance their budgets. They've got to run the schools. They can't run up massive debt. They can't push up the issues to last. So you talked about being for something instead of just being against something. You caught my attention a couple of weeks ago when you came out and you said it was a bad idea to shut down the federal government over Obamacare.
Right.
Why?
Well, I have real problems with, obviously, Obamacare, and I've laid it out in my state. I didn't take the Medicaid expansion. I didn't do the state exchanges. But I just think that's you're disconnecting things. There's a huge problem. You know it, back from the mid-'90s.
We did it.
When the
helped re-elect Bill Clinton by shutting down the government.
Well, because people want things to work. Now, a lot of people like myself, we talked before about libertarians, a lot of people like my sons who are 18 and 19 want even less government than there is. But I think most Americans, even if they don't like the size and growth of government, they still want something to work.
Right.
Something very fundamentally to work. And that's the difference, again, between Washington and the states. At the state level, we may want, as Republican governors, less government, but we want the government that we have to work.
Well, you mentioned sequestration as something that just goes over the head of a lot of people, but I'm wondering from your perspective as a governor how that policy has impacted your state, your ability to do your job.
Well, it has an impact no matter what, whether it's the shutdown, whether it's sequester. Yeah. You know, we found a way to deal with it. I remember back in February, all the governors get together every year with the president in the White House, and the president, obviously, back early in the year was very adamant against his opposition, I should say, to the sequester. I said very respectfully to the, Mr. President, when we sat down with all the governors, Democrat, Republican alike, I said, you should do with your cabinet what we've done over the last couple of years in states all across America, and that is, if you don't like the sequester plan, have your cabinet put together an alternative plan. Sure. And then find a better way to do that. Unfortunately, at that time, he was pushing for more revenue, meaning i.e. more taxes, and it never went anywhere.
But how those cuts
they come back and said, we've got a better way to deal with this. And there's examples all there. We saw it with the Department of Transportation, with air traffic controllers. We saw it with the Department of Defense, with some of the furloughs they've had to do. Yeah. You had to see it with social services.
Governor, we see more and more that it's almost as if Washington becomes irrelevant and that all the action, all the actual sort of movement takes place on the level of the state, of the governors and mayors, too, who are actually in the front line of actually getting practically things done. Well, what can be done in Washington then? Because we can't just sit here with this stasis forever. I mean, how can we co-opt, change, reorganize so that this doesn't happen anymore?
Well, I've always thought, and it's not just going back to Reagan, even with some of the things that Bill Clinton did, give more power to the states. And it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican governors, more funding, we call it block grants, but whether it's Medicaid, whether it's education, other things like that. The history of this country is based on democracy. It was really driven by the laboratories of democracy, which were at the state level. The more that power is pushed to the state and ultimately to the local level, the better off we are. The more it's pulled in and gravitates towards Washington. It doesn't matter Democrat or Republican. I could argue that it's better one party or the other, but in the end, more power concentrated in Washington, I don't think it's a good thing for anybody in America. It's better if it's pushed out to the states and ultimately to the local level.
All right, Scott, how are the Pack going to do?
I'm getting ready to size up and over the Super Bowl. Right?
Oh, come on.
Come on, man.
Defense looks good. We got Bama, gave us a good running back. I don't know how we got him. What was it, like 62 in the draft?
Good.
Yeah. He looked good the other night.
That was a steal. You guys got it. So what round did he go in?
He was like number 62 in the whole draft because he was injured. He looked good the other night against the Rams. So.
Eddie Lacy, man, he's powerful.
Yeah. So you get a running back with Aaron Rodgers. You get Cobb back healthy. You get Jordy Nelson. There's no stopping.
There just ain't no stopping us now. All right, Scott Walker, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And still at a morning show from the Hit Show's Breaking.